The summer sun was just rising over Oregon's Mount Hood when Jessica Miller signed her name in the Warren Trail Register at 7:42 a.m. To the ranger, it was nothing unusual, just another hiker heading for the summit. But by nightfall, Jessica never returned home. 3 years later, a single hiking boot wedged in a crack of stone would reveal a hidden SD card with 15 blurry photos, all taken the very day she vanished. What happened on that mountain? And who or what was captured in those final images? Jessica Miller was 34 years old, a woman whose life looked ordinary from the outside but carried quiet layers of discipline and solitude. She lived with her husband David in a modest house on the east side of Portland, Oregon. Neighbors remembered her as polite, someone who always waved when she walked the dog, yet rarely lingered for small talk. At the office, co-workers described her as reliable, the kind of person who never missed a deadline, who stayed late to help when others rushed out. She was steady, one colleague later said, not the type to take reckless chances. But on weekends, Jessica stepped out of that steady frame. Hiking wasn't just a hobby, it was her escape. The forests and peaks of the Pacific Northwest became her sanctuary. Friends invited her to join outdoor groups, but she usually declined. She liked the quiet, her younger brother Michael recalled. She said being alone on the trail cleared her head in ways nothing else could. Mount Hood was her favorite place. Rising more than 11,000 feet above the Cascade Range, it dominated the skyline east of Portland. Tourists came for ski resorts and family photos. Locals came for challenge and rhythm. Jessica had climbed it many times, sticking to well-marked trails. She knew the routes, the landmarks, the hours it usually took to go up and come down. To her family, that experience was reassuring. She wasn't some novice, David told reporters. She respected the mountain. She prepared. On the Friday evening before her disappearance, nothing seemed unusual. Jessica came home, folded laundry, and set aside her blue windbreaker, gray hiking pants, and the brown Merrell boots she always wore on the trail. She packed a small black backpack, 2 water bottles, protein bars, a light first aid kit. She charged her phone, left it on the kitchen counter overnight, and told David she'd head out early. It was routine. They had lived this routine many times before. The next morning, July 17, 2021, dawned cooler than usual for midsummer. Temperatures hovered around 60 degrees at the base of the trail, with a breeze that smelled of pine and damp earth. A ranger later remembered Jessica arriving at the South Trailhead just before 7:45 a.m. She signed her name carefully in the logbook. Jessica Miller, 34, Portland. Next to it, under destination, she wrote a single line. Summit, then back. The ranger thought nothing of it. Dozens of hikers scribbled the same thing every weekend. Still, he noticed her voice, calm, almost cheerful, when she said, "Just the summit today." From there, she would have walked past tall firs forming a shaded tunnel, the morning light slicing through branches, the air filled with the sound of streams tumbling downhill. Other hikers that morning remembered the weather as perfect. Clear skies, crisp air, visibility stretching for miles. Conditions were, in every sense, safe. Jessica herself had reasons for choosing that morning. She disliked hiking in heavy heat. Early starts gave her time to reach the summit by late morning, descend by mid-afternoon, and be home before dinner. It was a rhythm she followed with near mathematical precision. Her family relied on that predictability. Her mother once joked, "We could set our clocks by Jessica's hikes." That predictability is what made her disappearance so jarring. For someone else, coming home late might not raise alarms. For Jessica, every hour was accounted for. By writing her name in that book, she had effectively drawn the opening line of a story that should have ended the same way it always did, with her walking back through the front door by 4 o'clock, tired but safe. Instead, that day would unravel into silence. And it is this contrast between the normalcy of her preparations and the mystery that followed that still haunts everyone who remembers her. Because Jessica wasn't reckless or impulsive or careless. She was the careful one, the steady one, the woman who triple-checked her shoelaces before a climb. Which is why, when she vanished, family, friends, and strangers alike struggled to believe it. At first glance, Jessica Miller's story could have belonged to anyone. A young professional, a weekend adventurer, a woman who loved the trail as much as she loved the quiet moments it gave her. But on that July morning, the trail she trusted would betray her or swallow her whole, and the mountain she loved would become the stage for one of Oregon's most enduring mysteries. The morning of July 17th, 2021, began like countless others in Oregon summer. The city of Portland stirred awake under soft light, commuters grabbing coffee, families loading cars for weekend trips. On the eastern horizon, Mount Hood gleamed with a pale crown of snow. For Jessica Miller, it was another Saturday of ritual, an early departure, a quick drive to the trailhead, a steady climb toward the summit. At 6:45 a.m., neighbors noticed her leaving home. She carried her black backpack, wore her navy windbreaker, and walked with the same measured pace she always did. Nothing seemed off, one neighbor recalled later. She waved, smiled, just like any other morning. David, her husband, had kissed her goodbye at the door, reminding her to text when she reached the trail. She promised she would, he told investigators, but no text ever came. By 7:40 a.m., Jessica's Subaru pulled into the gravel parking lot at the Timberline trailhead. A few other cars sat scattered among the trees. The air was cool, hovering around 60 degrees, and the scent of pine needles mixed with damp soil. She tightened the laces on her boots, slung the backpack across her shoulders, and walked toward the ranger station. Inside, a battered logbook rested on a wooden desk, its pages filled with signatures, dates, destinations. At exactly 7:42, Jessica wrote her name. Her handwriting was steady, deliberate. Jessica Miller, 34, Portland, Summit, return. A park employee glanced at her as she closed the pen. He later recalled, she seemed relaxed, said she was just going up and back. Nothing unusual. Moments later, she stepped onto the trail. The first stretch wound through tall Douglas firs, their trunks towering like pillars, the morning light filtering through in golden shards. The ground was damp but firm, packed dirt with roots weaving across the path. Jessica set her pace, slow, steady, methodical. Other hikers that morning remembered crossing paths with a woman who fit her description. Dark jacket, dark hair tied back, walking with quiet determination. By 8:30, the sun had risen higher, burning off the cool mist that lingered over meadows. Streams ran briskly with melted snow, their sounds merging with birdsong. Jessica carried a small camera slung across her shoulder. Friends said she liked to snap photos of unusual plants or the way sunlight hit the rocks. She wasn't the type to linger for long selfies or stage shots. She hiked with purpose. At 9:15, she would have passed the first major rest stop, a wooden bench near a lookout point. Most hikers paused there, taking in sweeping views of the Cascade Range. But search teams later found no trace she had stopped. No crumbs, no water bottle, no witness recalling her seated there. It was as if she walked right past without breaking stride. By mid-morning, conditions remained ideal. Clear skies, temperatures climbing towards 70 degrees, visibility stretching for miles. It was the kind of day hikers dream about, safe, open, inviting. Yet, beneath that calm exterior, something would soon shift. Because according to investigators, this was the last part of Jessica's hike that could be reliably reconstructed. After 9:30 a.m., the timeline fractures. Some hikers swore they saw a woman in a navy jacket further up near the tree line around 10:30. Others claimed they noticed someone off-trail hours later. Each account contradicted the next, leaving a fog of uncertainty. What is certain is this. At 7:42 a.m., Jessica Miller signed her name. By 8 a.m., she was on the trail, walking through the quiet woods she loved. By 9:30, she should have been approaching the steeper switchbacks leading to Mount Hood's southern ridge. She should have reached the summit by noon, descended by 3, texted her husband, and driven home for dinner. That was the pattern she had always followed. But on that morning, the pattern broke. Her name in the logbook became the last confirmed proof of her presence. Everything after, sightings, guesses, fragments, became the puzzle that still haunts Oregon today. By mid-afternoon, David Miller expected to hear the familiar buzz of his wife's text message. Jessica always sent it, sometimes just a single line, heading down now, or on my way home. But on July 17th, 2021, no message came. At first, David brushed it off. Cell reception on Mount Hood could be patchy. Maybe she was taking her time, Maybe she stopped for a late snack on the trail. But as the clock crept past 4 p.m., his chest tightened. Jessica was meticulous about time. If she wasn't home by 4, she would call. At 5:00, he dialed her cell, straight to voicemail. At 5:30, he called again. Still nothing. He walked through their quiet house, noticing her work laptop still open on the dining table, her planner with next week's appointments written in neat black ink. Nothing suggested she had planned to vanish. By 6 hours, his unease spilled into panic. David called Jessica's younger brother, Michael. "Have you heard from Jess?" he asked, his voice cracking. Michael hadn't. He was at his apartment across town, preparing dinner. He dropped everything, grabbed his car keys, and sped to David's house. Together, they dialed the non-emergency police line, then 911. "My wife went hiking this morning," David told the dispatcher. "She always comes back by now. She's not answering her phone. Please, we need help." The dispatcher's voice was calm but firm. "Sir, how long has she been overdue?" "2 hours," David replied. "This isn't like her. She would never just not come home." By 6:30 p.m., the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office had logged the report. Search and rescue teams were mobilized. Helicopters were unavailable until daylight, but ground teams and trained dogs could be dispatched immediately. Meanwhile, Jessica's parents, Carol and Tom Miller, received the call every parent dreads. Carol's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the phone. Tom, a retired school principal, tried to steady his voice, but his eyes gave him away. Wide, fearful, searching for control. They drove through rush-hour traffic toward the base of Mount Hood, praying out loud, repeating Jessica's name like a mantra. At 7:15 p.m., the first rescue team assembled at the Timberline trailhead. Flashlights clicked on, radios buzzed with coordinates, and volunteers spread out along the path Jessica had most likely taken. "Jessica Miller, if you can hear us, call out." Their voices echoed into the deepening woods. Only silence answered. Night fell fast. The temperature dropped into the mid-40s, a biting chill that felt sharper under the open sky. The forest that seemed welcoming at sunrise turned into a wall of black. David stood near the ranger station, arms crossed tight, watching beams of light sweep through the trees. "She hates the cold," he whispered. "She hates the cold." Michael insisted on joining the search. He strapped on a borrowed headlamp and followed one of the teams up the trail. He'd hiked with his sister before. He knew her pace, the way she favored her right foot when the ground sloped, the spots she liked to pause for water. She wouldn't have gone off trail, he told rescuers. Not Jess. Yet by midnight, there was still no trace. No dropped bottle, no fabric torn on a branch, no footprints that could be confirmed as hers. The logbook remained the last solid evidence, her neat handwriting at 7:42 a.m. Beyond that, Jessica might as well have stepped into thin air. Back at the base, Carol sat on a folding chair, clutching her daughter's photo in trembling hands. "She's strong," she said over and over, as if trying to convince herself. "Jessica's strong. She'll make it through the night." But every passing hour made the truth harder to ignore. Something was terribly wrong. And for the Miller family, July 17th, the day that began with a routine hike, was already transforming into the longest night of their lives. As dust settled over Mount Hood, the mountain changed character. The same slopes that had glistened under morning sunlight now loomed as dark, jagged silhouettes against a fading sky. Search and rescue crews tightened their headlamps, checked radios, and prepared for an all-night operation. Deputy Mark Lawson, a veteran of dozens of rescues, briefed the first wave of volunteers. "We follow the main trail to the timberline, grid search every half mile, watch for clothing, gear, or signs of distress. It's going to be a cold night. Stay sharp." The air temperature dipped quickly, from the upper 50s into the low 40s. Winds funneled down the slopes, making the pines whisper and sway. For anyone stuck on the mountain without proper shelter, hypothermia was a real risk. That fact weighed heavily on the minds of everyone present, especially Jessica's family, huddled near the ranger station. David stood rigid, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the darkness. He replayed their last conversation over and over, her smile at the doorway, her promise to text. "She should have been back by now," he whispered to no one in particular. His mother-in-law, Carol, sat on a folding chair clutching a rosary, her lips moving silently in prayer. Beside her, Tom tried to mask his fear by peppering deputies with questions. How many people were searching? How far would they go tonight? What if she had fallen off the trail? At 8:15 p.m., the first teams moved out. Beams of light cut through the dense forest, sweeping across tree trunks and underbrush. The dogs strained at their leashes, noses pressed to the ground, but gave no strong signals. "Jessica!" Voices rang out into the night, echoing off the slopes. The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. Higher up the trail, Michael Miller pushed himself to keep pace with the rescuers. Sweat dripped down his back despite the cold. Every snapping branch, every rustle in the brush made his heart race. He strained his ears, hoping for his sister's voice, a distant cry for help. But all he heard was the crunch of boots and the hollow call of owls. By 10:00 p.m., the search teams reached the first major overlook. Normally, hikers would pause here, taking in sweeping views of Portland's city lights far below. Tonight, the only glow came from headlamps and flashlights flickering across rocks. No discarded water bottles, no food wrappers, no torn fabric caught on branches. Nothing to suggest Jessica had rested here, or anywhere at all. The lack of evidence unnerved the rescuers. Typically, even a careful hiker leaves behind some trace. Footprints in mud, a scuffed rock, a dropped granola wrapper. Jessica seemed to have left none. "It's like she walked into the woods and disappeared," one searcher muttered. By midnight, teams regrouped briefly. Maps were spread out under flashlight beams. The question was asked aloud: did she even make it this far? The logbook said yes. The ranger remembered her, but from the trail itself, there was only absence. Meanwhile, at the base, David paced restlessly. He kept checking Jessica's phone location, though he knew the signal was gone. "She hates the cold," he kept saying, his voice breaking. Carol rocked slightly in her chair, whispering prayers. Tom gripped his son's shoulder, trying to lend strength even as his own resolve cracked. At 1:30 a.m., the search expanded beyond the main trail. Smaller teams swept side paths and drainage gullies, places where a hiker might slip or wander off. They found fallen logs, broken branches, but no signs of Jessica. The dogs grew restless, circling without direction. By dawn, the mountain lay quiet under a pale gray sky. The search had covered nearly 6 miles of trail and countless side routes. Still no trace, no gear, no footprints, no answer to their calls. For the Millers, sunrise brought no relief. Jessica's seat at the breakfast table remained empty, her coffee mug untouched. The night had stretched into a void of questions, and with every unanswered hour, hope began to fray. That first night search should have been the beginning of her rescue. Instead, it marked the beginning of a mystery, one that would tighten its grip on Mount Hood, her family, and an entire community for years to come. By the second day of the search, news of Jessica Miller's disappearance spread across Oregon. Local TV vans parked at the Timberline trailhead, reporters clutching microphones, their voices carrying over the hum of generators. Helicopters circled overhead, cameras scanning the slopes. The story of a young professional who vanished on Mount Hood was no longer just a family crisis. It had become a community mystery. With publicity came witnesses. People who had hiked that Saturday began stepping forward, some eager to help, others hesitant, each with fragments of memory that only deepened the fog. The first account came from a retired firefighter named Alan Pierce, who told deputies he had been on the trail around 10:30 a.m. "I saw a woman in a navy jacket not far from the tree line," he said. "She was moving steadily, didn't look lost." Alan admitted he never got close enough to see her face, but her clothing and build matched Jessica's. A second statement, however, pulled the timeline in a different direction. Samantha Lopez, a 21-year-old college student hiking with 2 friends, swore she saw a woman fitting Jessica's description around 1 p.m. "She wasn't on the trail," Samantha explained. "She was maybe 20 or 30 yards off, kind of circling like she didn't know which way to go. I thought about helping, but then she headed back toward the main path before we reached her." When asked if she was sure it was Jessica, Samantha hesitated. "I think so, but it was from a distance." Then came the most unsettling account. A local fisherman, Earl Henderson, claimed that at 4:30 p.m., he saw a lone woman rushing downhill near a creek at the base of the mountain. She looked like she was in a hurry, almost running, he told deputies. I figured she just wanted to beat the sunset. Earl insisted her jacket was dark blue like Jessica's, but he admitted he couldn't swear it was her face. The three accounts clashed badly. If Alan was right, Jessica was near the summit at mid-morning. If Samantha's story held, she was disoriented off-trail in early afternoon. And if Earl was correct, she was nearly back at the base by late afternoon. Could all three be true, or was one, or all, simply mistaken? Investigators pressed the witnesses. Could they recall specific details? Her hair, her pack, her stride? Alan said the woman had dark hair tied back, but many hikers did. Samantha thought she saw a black backpack, though she admitted she might have been influenced by photos shown later in the news. Earl, under repeated questioning, admitted the woman he saw could have been any hiker in a dark jacket. Detective Mark Lawson sighed during a press conference. Eyewitness accounts can be powerful, but they can also be unreliable, he explained. We're working to cross-reference these statements with known trail times and weather conditions. For Jessica's family, the contradictions were torture. David clung to Alan's version. If Jessica had been seen near the summit, maybe she had simply lost her way coming down. Carol, her mother, latched onto Samantha's story, imagining her daughter confused but alive in the woods. Michael, her brother, found himself replaying Earl's account. If she really was rushing down the mountain at 4:30, she was almost home. Why didn't she make it? Reporters seized on the discrepancies. One headline read, 3 sightings, 3 timelines. Where was Jessica? TV commentators speculated late into the night, drawing maps and arrows that only deepened public fascination. But in the command center at the trailhead, investigators stared at the same blank puzzle. Every missing person case depends on a timeline. With Jessica, the timeline dissolved into smoke. After her 7:42 a.m. signature in the logbook, nothing was certain. She had been everywhere and nowhere on Mount Hood that day. By the third day of the search, fatigue began to set in, not just for the rescuers combing the mountain, but for Jessica's family waiting at the base. Crews had swept miles of marked trail, rappelled into gullies, flown drones over ridges. Yet every report ended the same way. No sign of Jessica. Without evidence, theories rushed to fill the void. Around folding tables in the command tent, investigators and volunteers debated possibilities, their voices low but urgent. The first theory was a simple accident. Jessica could have slipped on loose scree, fallen into a ravine, or twisted her ankle and collapsed off trail. But veteran rescuers found the idea unsatisfying. Accidents leave clues, one team leader said. Broken branches, footprints, gear dropped in panic. Here, nothing. Helicopter sweeps with thermal cameras showed no heat signatures. Dogs trained to detect human scent picked up nothing reliable. If she had fallen, why wasn't she found? The second theory was disorientation. Even experienced hikers could stray off path, especially in areas where side trails branched out or fog rolled in. Yet conditions that Saturday had been nearly perfect. Clear skies, dry ground, excellent visibility. Jessica wasn't known for wandering. She stuck to her route like clockwork, her brother Michael insisted. She wasn't the type to take shortcuts or explore side trails. The third theory pointed to a medical emergency. A sudden heart attack, stroke, or seizure might explain her vanishing. But at 34, Jessica had no known health issues. She ran 5Ks, hiked every week, and had passed a full medical check just months earlier. Even if she had collapsed, rescuers argued, her body or belongings should have been visible along the trail. Then came the theory no one wanted to say out loud: foul play. Could Jessica have encountered someone dangerous on the mountain? Crime on Mount Hood was rare, but not unheard of. If she met the wrong person in the wrong place, things could have gone bad fast, one deputy admitted. Yet the trail that day had been busy, dotted with families, couples, and college groups. How could an attack have occurred unnoticed? When news outlets caught wind of the foul play theory, headlines flared, "Missing hiker, kidnap or accident." For the Millers, the speculation cut deep. Carol shook her head, tears streaming. Jessica wasn't reckless. She wasn't meeting anyone. She just wanted to hike. David clenched his jaw when asked by reporters whether his wife might have left willingly. Absolutely not, he said. She had no reason to run. We had plans for next week. She loved her life. Another theory crept in from the edges. Voluntary disappearance. Some whispered she might have wanted to start over, free from responsibility, but those who knew her scoffed. Jessica had left her wallet, her credit cards, even her phone at home. Her planner was filled with appointments and to-do lists for the following week. That's not someone about to vanish, her coworker explained. That's someone who planned to come back. Inside the command post, Detective Mark Lawson felt the weight of each discarded theory. He kept circling back to the one fact no one could explain, the total absence of trace. It's not just that she's gone, he said to his team. It's that nothing of her remains. No bag, no water bottle, no clothing, nothing. That doesn't happen in the wilderness. Something else is at play. By day's end, maps on the wall were cluttered with circles and arrows, each representing a different hunch. Rescuers shuffled out, weary, while the Millers lingered by the fire pit. Michael's voice cracked as he told a reporter, "Every possibility feels like a nightmare. If it was an accident, why can't we find her? If it was someone else, what did they do to my sister?" Theories multiplied, but certainty never came. And for Jessica's family, the unknown was worse than any single explanation, because until the truth surfaced, every grim possibility remained alive. By the end of the first week, the Miller family's private nightmare had become a statewide headline. Satellite trucks lined the gravel parking lot near Timberline Lodge. Reporters leaned against tripods, microphones poised, while volunteers in orange vests trudged past with tired eyes. Every night, local newscasts led with the same haunting line. Jessica Miller, 34, vanished on Mount Hood without a trace. Her photo, a smiling brunette in a blue jacket, holding a mug of coffee, flashed across TV screens from Portland to Seattle. Neighbors described the shock of seeing her face on national networks. "It didn't feel real," one said. "That was just Jess, the woman who walked her dog past our house, and now she was missing." For the Miller family, the media attention was both a blessing and a curse. More coverage meant more volunteers, more eyes on the trail. But it also meant microphones shoved in their faces, cameras waiting to capture every tear. On the third day, Carol Miller stood before a cluster of reporters, clutching her daughter's photograph. Her voice quivered as she begged, "Jessica is strong, but she doesn't belong out there alone. Please, if anyone saw her, anything at all, come forward. We just want her home." The footage aired on every evening newscast, Carol's trembling plea replayed on loop. David, meanwhile, bristled under the glare. He agreed to one interview, his jaw clenched as he declared, "She loved her life. She didn't run away. Somebody out there saw something." When tabloids later hinted at marital strain, David slammed the door on further press. "We're not a story," he snapped. "We're a family looking for our wife, our daughter." Michael took a different path. The younger brother spent his days hiking alongside volunteers, his nights scrolling social media posts about the case. He joined Facebook groups where strangers debated every theory, some offering sympathy, others spinning conspiracies. "It's like they don't even see her as a person anymore," he muttered. "Just entertainment." The pressure wasn't only emotional. Donations poured in through GoFundMe pages to support search efforts, but each dollar came with expectations. Families across Oregon wanted answers. The sheriff's department set up twice-daily press briefings. Maps were pinned with bright markers showing where search teams had scoured. Each time the message was the same: no new leads. The absence of progress fueled speculation. Talk radio hosts asked if foul play was being ignored. Online forums debated whether Jessica had staged her own disappearance. Cable pundits compared her case to other infamous mysteries, turning her name into a soundbite. At night, the Millers returned to David's house, their exhaustion heavier than their footsteps. Carol refused to sleep in a bed, instead curling up on the couch by the phone. "If she calls," she whispered, "I want to be the one to answer." Tom paced the kitchen, replaying maps in his head. David sat at the dining table, staring at Jessica's planner with its neat to-do lists. Dentist appointment Tuesday, payroll report Friday, lunch with a friend next week. Proof in his eyes that she never planned to vanish. By the end of week 2, Volunteers numbered in the hundreds. Some came from as far as California, carrying sleeping bags and flashlights, eager to join the search. Timberline Lodge became a staging ground, a strange mix of ski tourists, sipping hot cocoa, and exhausted searchers filing past, covered in dirt and pine needles. Yet for all the manpower, for all the attention, Mount Hood remained silent. No clothing, no gear, no body. The Millers faced cameras again on day 14. This time, David's voice broke. "We're begging you. Don't let Jessica become just another name on a missing persons list. She's real. She's loved. She deserves to be found." The clip went viral, shared thousands of times on Twitter and TikTok. Strangers lit candles, held vigils in Portland parks, and posted photos of Mount Hood with the hashtag #FindJessicaMiller. But behind the public outcry, the family's private grief deepened. Nights grew colder, search teams thinned, and the mountains seemed to swallow every prayer. The Miller family had thought the worst day of their lives was July 17th, when Jessica failed to come home. They were wrong. The true agony came afterward, living in the glare of cameras, forced to perform their hope in front of strangers, while inside they were unraveling. 3 years passed, and the Miller family lived in a rhythm of unanswered questions. The searches slowed, media attention drifted, and volunteers returned to their lives. By 2024, Jessica's case had become a cold file, stacked among others in the archives of the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. Yet for her family, time never dulled the ache. Every July 17th, Michael hiked to the Timberline trailhead, leaving flowers beneath the weathered logbook, where his sister's name still lingered on page after page. Carol, now grayer and frailer, kept Jessica's bedroom untouched. Bed neatly made, books stacked, the scent of her favorite lavender candle faint but persistent. It seemed as though Mount Hood had swallowed Jessica forever. Until one September morning, a local hiker named Robert Hayes veered from his usual route. Robert, 58, had trekked the mountain for decades. That day, curiosity led him along a faint side path choked with undergrowth. About 20 yards in, something caught his eye. A dull brown object wedged in a crevice between two boulders. At first, he thought it was trash, a boot discarded by a careless camper. But as he tugged it free, his pulse quickened. It was a women's hiking boot, still laced, scuffed but strangely intact. And stuffed deep inside was a small Ziploc bag. Robert knelt on the rocky ground, hands trembling as he pulled it open. And inside lay a single SD card. It was dusty, edges worn, but sealed tight enough to protect it from years of rain and snow. "I just froze," Robert later said. "I remembered the posters, the news stories, that missing woman. I knew this could be hers." He hurried down the trail, cradling the boot like evidence, and drove straight to the ranger station. Within hours, the sheriff's office had the item in their possession. News spread quickly. Possible break in Jessica Miller case. After 3 silent years, Mount Hood had given something back. At the Miller home, the phone rang past midnight. David answered, heart racing. Detectives explained what had been found. A boot, an SD card. "We can't confirm it's hers yet," they cautioned, "but the make and size match what Jessica wore." The revelation hit the family like a lightning bolt. Carol wept openly, clutching the phone as if it were her daughter's hand. Michael sat stunned, whispering, "Finally, finally something." For David, hope and dread tangled in his chest. If the boot was Jessica's, it meant she had been there. But what about the card? Could it hold her final moments? The next day, reporters crowded outside the sheriff's office. Photographers zoomed in as evidence bags were carried inside, sealed tight. Forensic specialists were called, experts in digital recovery and environmental degradation. 3 years is a long time, one technician explained, but sometimes if sealed right, data survives. Speculation exploded online. Twitter hashtags revived overnight. Reddit threads buzzed with theories. Some users insisted the card would show proof of an accident. Others whispered darker possibilities, that the card might reveal another person with Jessica, or even her killer. Meanwhile, detectives kept silent, refusing to share details until testing was complete. The Miller family waited in agonizing suspense. Carol lit candles every evening, praying the card would speak. Michael told a local paper, "Whatever's on it, answers, closure, even just a clue. We need to know. For 3 years, Jessica Miller's disappearance had been defined by absence. No body, no gear, no trace. Now, a single boot and a hidden SD card promised to change everything. What secrets lay trapped inside those few millimeters of plastic? Was it the key to understanding why Jessica never came home? Or just another riddle left by the mountain? Either way, the silence of Mount Hood had finally cracked. The SD card sat sealed in an evidence bag, no larger than a postage stamp, yet it carried the weight of 3 years of unanswered questions. Detectives knew it had to be handled carefully. Exposure to heat, moisture, or even static electricity could destroy whatever remained inside. The card was rushed to the Oregon State Police Forensics Lab in Salem, where digital recovery specialists began the painstaking process. For days, the Miller family waited in silence. David paced the living room, unable to eat. Carol clutched her rosary beads, whispering prayers for clarity. Michael drove to Salem twice just to sit outside the lab building, as if his presence might somehow will the results to come faster. Finally, after a week of careful work, investigators gathered the family and select reporters in a press briefing. A detective stepped forward, holding a stack of printed images. "We were able to recover 15 photographs from the card," he announced. The room fell still. The first images were unremarkable. Blurry shots of tree trunks, rocks, and patches of sky. Some appeared to have been taken in haste, the camera tilted, the focus off. "It's as if the person holding the camera wasn't trying to compose a photo," the technician explained. "They were just clicking." But then came the images that chilled the room. Several photos clearly showed sections of Mount Hood recognizable to experienced hikers. The background matched areas slightly off the main trail, rugged and less traveled. This alone raised questions. Why had Jessica, a disciplined hiker who favored established routes, strayed into such terrain? One photo captured the jagged outline of the southern ridge, but in the foreground, a blurred object glinted, a metallic band, likely a wristwatch catching sunlight. Family members confirmed Jessica often wore a silver watch on hikes. Another photo revealed something more haunting, a faint silhouette in the distance. At first glance, it could be mistaken for a tree or rock formation, but zooming in suggested the shape of a human figure. Too small and distorted to identify, but undeniable enough to stir debate. Was Jessica alone? One reporter asked. Or was someone with her? The timestamps embedded in the files deepened the mystery. Each image carried metadata, known as XIF data, showing the time and date it was taken. All 15 photos were stamped July 17, 2021, between 2:15 p.m. and 4:10 p.m. That was hours after Jessica should have begun her descent. "This doesn't fit her pattern," Michael said quietly, studying the papers. "She never stayed that late. She would have been halfway home by then." Detectives tried to reconstruct the sequence. The early photos suggested Jessica had reached a clearing with scattered boulders. Later shots grew shakier, angled downward, as if taken while moving quickly. The final image was the most disturbing, a blurred frame of tangled branches with what looked like the edge of a boot in the corner. Cut off, almost accidental. Speculation ignited instantly. Some believed the photos proved Jessica became disoriented, wandered off trail, and tried to document her surroundings. Others saw darker hints, that the presence of a second figure meant she wasn't alone, that someone else might have been there in her final hours. Detective Mark Lawson cautioned restraint. "Photographs tell us where someone was, not necessarily what happened. We cannot draw conclusions beyond what the evidence supports." But he admitted privately to colleagues that the images disturbed him. "If she was scared," he said, "why keep taking pictures?" For the Miller family, the photos were both a gift and a wound. Carol broke down as she held the prints. "These are her last hours," she whispered. David stared at the timestamps, fists clenched, whispering, "Why didn't she call? Why didn't anyone find her?" The images offered a glimpse into Jessica's final day. Yet, like the mountain itself, they refused to give up a straight answer. Each picture raised more questions than it solved. 15 photographs, 15 fragments of truth. Enough to prove Jessica was alive deep into that afternoon. but not enough to tell the world why she never came home. Detectives knew the photos were only fragments of a larger puzzle. To make sense of them, they returned to Mount Hood with search teams, geologists, and even botanists, determined to retrace Jessica Miller's final steps. The first task was to identify the precise locations in the recovered images. Specialists compared the jagged ridges and clusters of alpine firs in the photos to modern satellite maps. After several days, they narrowed it down. The eastern slope, nearly a mile off the main timberline trail, in terrain hikers rarely ventured into. On a clear Saturday morning, investigators hiked out with the Miller family, watching from the base camp. It had been 3 years since anyone believed Jessica had set foot there, yet her presence still seemed to linger. "It's like walking into her last footprints," Michael whispered as he stood at the trailhead. As the team climbed, the atmosphere shifted from routine search to eerie reenactment. The detectives carried printed enlargements of the photos, holding them up against the skyline, matching angles with the real ridges. One by one, the landmarks aligned: the boulder field, the crooked pine leaning at 45 degrees, the clearing where light cut through in the same fragmented pattern as in Jessica's images. But the terrain was punishing: loose rock, sudden drops, and thick brush. "This isn't a place she would have gone casually," Detective Lawson muttered. "Not Jessica. Not alone." About 2 hours in, they reached a narrow gully. Here, the resemblance was unmistakable. One photo had shown branches tangled in the foreground, with a faint boot edge at the corner. Investigators crouched in the same spot, lifting cameras to recreate the shot. The perspective matched perfectly. "This is it," Lawson said. "The last photo was taken right here." The discovery triggered a wave of unease. Why had Jessica descended into a gully she would have known was dangerous? Theories spread quickly among the team. Perhaps she was disoriented. Perhaps she was running from something. Perhaps she was following someone. As they combed the area, searchers found small, weathered fragments: a strip of red nylon consistent with outdoor clothing, a plastic shard that might have been part of a water bottle. Nothing definitive, but enough to suggest someone had once been there. A ranger who had patrolled the mountain for decades shook his head. If she fell here, the body could have been covered by snowmelt, washed deeper into the ravine. This mountain keeps secrets. Forensic teams mapped every inch, documenting the slope angles, vegetation patterns, and possible fall zones. Drones scanned from above, searching for cavities or hidden crevices where remains might rest unseen. Still, nothing resembling human remains emerged. The Miller family waited below, anxiously receiving updates by radio. When Carol heard about the red fabric, she gasped. "Her jacket," she whispered, her eyes welling with tears. Michael gripped her hand, though he too struggled to hold back emotion. "At least we know she was here," he said, voice tight. Meanwhile, debate raged among experts. Some argued the scattered evidence and final images pointed to an accidental fall, a tragic but explainable end. Others weren't convinced. The figure seen in one photo, though blurred, gnawed at them. "If that was another person," one investigator remarked, "then this stops being a missing hiker case and starts being something else entirely." By sunset, the team descended, exhausted but unsettled. They had confirmed the site of Jessica's final hours but had not found her. For the Miller family, it was bittersweet. Proof she hadn't simply disappeared into thin air, but still no body, no closure. That night, David sat outside the base camp cabin, staring at the dark outline of Mount Hood. "She was here," he murmured. "She walked this ground, and something happened that none of us can explain." For the investigators, the reconstruction only deepened the mystery. The photos had led them to a place Jessica should never have been. The question that haunted everyone was simple, yet impossible. Why did she go there? And what or who was waiting for her? By the summer of 2025, 4 years had passed since Jessica Miller vanished on Mount Hood, and 1 year since the discovery of her boot and SD card. The investigation had reached its limits. No new evidence, no confirmed remains, only a string of theories. Yet her story refused to fade. For her family, life became a ritual of remembrance. Carol still set a place at the dining table on Jessica's birthday. Michael, now a father himself, hiked the Timberline Trail each July, carrying his baby daughter on his back. So she can meet her aunt, he told a reporter quietly. David, though more private, kept Jessica's planner on his desk. The pages, still filled with tidy notes and small doodles, reminded him that she had been planning for a future, one that never came. The wider community also kept the case alive. Each year, vigils were held in Portland parks, candles flickering against the night. Online, the hashtag #FindJessicaMiller continued to circulate, with strangers posting photos of Mount Hood alongside words of prayer or speculation. True crime podcasts dissected every angle: the timestamps, the blurred figure, the decision to leave the trail. Some argued it was a tragic accident. Others were convinced foul play was involved. The debate never settled. For law enforcement, the case remained officially open. Detectives admitted privately that the trail had grown cold. "Unless a hiker stumbles across something new," one officer told the Oregonian, "we may never know." Still, the SD card sat preserved in an evidence locker, its 15 cryptic images haunting everyone who had studied them. What lingered most was not the lack of answers, but the sense of unfinished story. Experts debated whether Jessica had strayed from the trail chasing a photograph, seeking solitude, or following someone she trusted. Theories piled up, but none could be proven, and that uncertainty became the heart of her legacy. In classrooms across Oregon, outdoor clubs began using Jessica's story as a cautionary tale. "Never hike alone, always carry a beacon, and leave clear plans with family," instructors repeated. Her name became shorthand for the risks of underestimating the wilderness, even for experienced hikers. Yet for her family, the message was not fear, but remembrance. At the 2025 vigil, Carol stood before a crowd of candles and said, "Jessica was more than a mystery. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. Don't remember her as someone lost. Remember her as someone who loved the mountains, who lived with kindness, and who still inspires people to care for each other." Her words drew tears, even from strangers. Still, when the speeches ended and the crowd dispersed, the questions returned. Why had Jessica left the trail? Who was the shadow in that photograph? And what happened in those final hours between 2:15 and 4:10 p.m. on July 17th, 2021? Mount Hood loomed in the distance, dark against the sunset, silent as ever. To some, it was a place of beauty. To others, a keeper of secrets. For the Millers, it was both: the mountain that had given Jessica joy and the mountain that had taken her away. And so the story of Jessica Miller remains suspended between fact and mystery. A name written in a trail register, a boot wedged in stone, 15 blurred photographs that raised more questions than answers. Perhaps one day another hiker will stumble across the missing piece. A scrap of fabric, a watch, even remains. Perhaps technology will unlock details hidden in those photos that current tools cannot reveal. Or perhaps, as time passes, the truth will remain where it has always been, buried in the ridges and silence of Mount Hood. Until then, Jessica's disappearance lives on, not only as an unsolved case, but as a reminder. Life can change in a single day. Families can be broken by a silence that never ends. And mountains, for all their beauty, sometimes hold on to their mysteries forever. And as Jessica's story fades into the whispers of Mount Hood, we're left with the questions that may never be answered. But what remains clear is the love of her family, the strength of a community, and the reminder that even in mystery, hope survives. If this story touched you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Silent Traces. Your support helps us continue sharing stories of faith, mystery, and the resilience of the human spirit. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you won't miss the next journey we bring to life.